The package arrived on a Tuesday. Plain brown cardboard with that distinctive glossy weight inside that could only be a magazine. I knew what it was, of course. My publicist had been sending excited texts for days. Still, seeing the actual physical copy made my fingers hesitate over the sealed edge. "Just open it already," I muttered to myself, voice echoing in the emptiness of my downtown Boston loft. The October afternoon light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust particles floating above my cluttered workstation. Circuit boards, soldered prototypes, and the Edison light bulb replica my grandfather had given me when I was 10. "The only Hayes with any imagination," he'd said, as if bestowing both gift and burden. I tore the package open. There I was. Marcus Hayes on the cover of Forbes, arms crossed, expression serious but confident against a backdrop of gleaming solar arrays. The headline read, "The Power Revolution, How Marcus Hayes Solved Renewable Energy's Biggest Problem." A laugh escaped my throat, sharp and unexpected. 7 years of work, 14 patent applications, and countless nights sleeping on the office sofa had culminated in this moment. I traced my finger over the glossy surface, half expecting the image to dissolve. "Told you so," I whispered, though no one was there to hear. But that wasn't entirely true. I could hear them all, echoes from family reunions past. "Still playing with your little batteries, Marcus?" Cameron's voice, dripping with fraternal condescension at last year's gathering. "When are you going to join a real company, son? Hayes men are leaders, not tinkerers." My father, Richard, 3 Christmases ago, whiskey glass in hand. "Your brother's fund just cleared 9 figures this quarter. What's new with your project?" My mother, attempting interest but landing on pity. The memories came unbidden, a familiar slideshow of disappointment and dismissal. I placed the magazine on my industrial steel kitchen counter and walked to the window. Boston's skyline was transitioning to twilight, building lights flickering on one by one. The MIT campus glowed in the distance, where it all began. My phone buzzed. "Lucas, did it arrive?" he asked without preamble. Lucas Chin, my best friend since freshman year engineering, the only person who never once suggested I quit. "Yeah, it's real." "Damn right it's real. Revolutionary energy storage system that increases battery efficiency by 300%? You're going to change everything." His enthusiasm warmed me as it always had. "We still on for drinks tonight?" "Absolutely," I confirmed, suddenly craving the normalcy of our Thursday ritual. "Usual place at 8? After hanging up, I returned to the magazine, flipping to the feature article. 6 pages detailing my journey from MIT doctoral candidate to energy storage revolutionary. The writer had captured the technical aspects surprisingly well, though she'd romanticized my lone genius narrative. If only she knew how truly alone it had been. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Marcus Hayes," I answered, professional mode engaged. "Marcus, Vanessa Mercer here. God, it's been ages." My body went cold. "Vanessa. My fiancée until 3 years ago when my company was hemorrhaging startup capital and my future looked bleak. I just saw the Forbes cover. It's incredible. I always knew you'd make it." No, she hadn't. Her parting words had been quite clear. "I need stability, Marcus. A partner, not a project." "Thanks," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "How did you get this number?" "Oh, don't be like that." Her laugh tinkled through the speaker. "I'm in town for a conference. Thought maybe we could catch up? For old time's sake." Through the window, I watched an airplane's lights blink across the darkening sky. 3 years ago, I'd have given anything to hear these words. Now they rang hollow. "I'm pretty busy these days," I said. "I can imagine. But surely the great Marcus Hayes can spare an hour for an old friend." "Friend? Is that what we were calling it?" "I'll check my schedule," I lied. "I'll text you." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and checked the date on the calendar. The annual Hayes family reunion was this weekend at my parents' Beacon Hill home. I hadn't attended since Vanessa left. I planned to skip this one too. I picked up the magazine again, staring at my own face. Something shifted inside me, a calculated, cold clarity I hadn't felt before. For years, I'd fantasized about proving them wrong, showing them the success they never believed I'd achieve. Now I had tangible proof in my hands. I opened my email and composed a message to my mother. "Looking forward to the reunion this weekend. Please let me know if I can bring anything." I hit send before I could reconsider, then picked up my phone and snapped a picture of the Forbes cover, sending it to the Hayes family group chat with no caption. 3 dots appeared immediately from multiple chat members, then disappeared. Then appeared again. No one quite knew what to say. "Good." I slipped the magazine into my messenger bag. The Edison bulb caught my eye from its place of honor on my desk. I picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. "Time to show them the light, Grandpa," I whispered. The reunion wouldn't be about reconciliation. It would be a reckoning. The Hayes family estate stood imperious against the autumn sky, red brick and white columns announcing Old Boston money to anyone who passed. I sat in my Tesla for several minutes, watching family members arrive in their predictable luxury vehicles. Cameron's Porsche, my cousin Edward's Range Rover, Aunt Patricia's chauffeured Bentley. The Forbes magazine rested on the passenger seat. I slipped it into my leather portfolio before stepping out into the crisp October air. "Marcus." My mother's voice carried across the circular driveway as I approached. Eleanor Hayes, ever the perfect hostess, descended the front steps with practiced grace. "We weren't sure you'd actually come." Her embrace felt tentative, as if I were a volatile substance that might react unpredictably to pressure. She pulled back, appraising me with new eyes. "Your father will be thrilled," she said, though her tone suggested uncertainty. The grand foyer smelled of beeswax polish and the cinnamon apple potpourri my mother had used since I was a child. Familiar voices echoed from the back of the house, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the meticulously maintained garden. "Is that him?" Marcus actually showed. Cameron's voice, followed by approaching footsteps on marble. My brother appeared, tumbler of whiskey already in hand, though it was barely 3 in the afternoon. The prodigal son returns. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he clapped me on the shoulder with unnecessary force. "Hello, Cameron," I replied evenly. "How's the fund performing this quarter?" A flicker of something, annoyance? Worry, crossed his face. "We're adjusting strategies given the market. Nothing to concern yourself with." "Marcus." My father's baritone announced his presence before he appeared from his study. Richard Hayes, 64 but looking 55 through sheer force of will and expensive tailoring. "You're looking well. Success agrees with you." He extended his hand, which I shook firmly. 20 years ago, I'd have given anything for the pride I now detected in his eyes. "Congratulations are in order," he continued. "Forbes no less." I had Janice frame a copy for my office. Of course he had. Now that it was impressive. Now that it reflected well on the Hayes name. "Thank you," I said, revealing nothing of my thoughts. "I brought my own copy, actually." As I pulled the magazine from my portfolio, a hush fell over the growing crowd of relatives. The cover photo seemed brighter somehow, more definitive in this space where I'd always been diminished. "The Power Revolution," my father read aloud. Quite the headline. "They're calling it the most significant advancement in energy storage of the decade," I said, watching their faces. The Hayes name associated with something other than finance. Imagine that. My mother swooped in with practiced social grace. "Let's all move to the garden. The caterers have outdone themselves this year." The reunion progressed predictably, cousins congratulating me with varying degrees of sincerity, Uncle Thomas asking if I'd considered going public, Aunt Patricia wondering if I'd finally buy a proper house. I navigated it all with a detached pleasantness, watching, waiting. It was during the dessert course that I made my strategic retreat to the house, ostensibly to use the restroom. Instead, I took the familiar path toward my father's study. Voices drifted from behind the partially closed door. "Becoming a problem," Cameron was saying. "He'll figure it out eventually." "He hasn't yet," my father replied. "And by the time he does, it won't matter. The question is whether Olivia has secured access to the full patents." I froze, blood rushing to my ears. "Last I heard she was close," Cameron said. "But after that Forbes piece, Marcus is being courted by every major energy company. If he accepts any of those offers before we—" "He won't," my father cut in. "Your brother may be brilliant with his batteries, but he's always been naive about business. That's why we put Vanessa back in play." My fingers gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. "You think he'll fall for that again?" Cameron sounded skeptical. "He nearly married her once. Men have blind spots and women like Vanessa know how to exploit them." A laugh from Cameron. "Poor Marcus. Always the last to know." I backed away silently, decades of navigating this house without drawing attention serving me well. My mind raced, connecting dots I should have seen years ago. In the downstairs powder room, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The successful man on the Forbes cover seemed like a stranger now, unaware of the conspiracy unfolding around him. Olivia, my business partner. Vanessa's sudden reappearance. My own family. When I returned to the garden, I wore a mask of pleasant engagement, raising my champagne in toasts, accepting belated congratulations. But inside something had crystallized, cold, sharp, and dangerous. They had underestimated me for the last time. The next morning, I sat in Lucas's cluttered office at our research facility in Cambridge, the blinds drawn against the autumn sunshine. My oldest friend listened without interruption as I recounted the conversation I'd overheard. Jesus, Marcus. Lucas ran a hand through his perpetually disheveled black hair. Your own family? And Olivia, I added. And Vanessa. Lucas whistled low. Vanessa Mercer. I wondered why she suddenly reached out to me last month asking about you. I straightened. She contacted you? You didn't mention that. She played it casual, just an old friend checking in. Lucas's expression darkened. I should have been suspicious. No one disappears for 3 years then just checks in. I paced the small office, stepping around piles of technical journals and prototype components. The Edison bulb sat on Lucas's desk. I'd brought it with me this morning, a talisman of sorts. We need to be methodical about this, I said finally. I want evidence, not just overheard snippets. Lucas nodded, already turning to his computer. Let's start with the money. Follow the paper trail. For the next 4 hours, we dug through financial records, corporate filings, and investment patterns. Lucas, brilliant with algorithms but hopeless with organization, had forgotten lunch. I ordered sandwiches from the deli across the street, and we ate while sifting through digital breadcrumbs. Here, Lucas said eventually, pointing at his screen. 3 years ago, Cameron's fund made a series of investments in Helios Energy. Our biggest competitor, I noted, leaning closer. Right when your prototype was showing promise in lab tests, Lucas continued. And look at this. 2 months after Vanessa left you, she was hired as a consultant by a subsidiary of your father's holding company. My stomach tightened. The same month we lost our first round of venture funding. Which Cameron's people had initially expressed interest in, Lucas confirmed grimly. The pieces were aligning with a clarity that made my chest hurt. I thought back to those desperate months, my technology promising but unproven, investors growing nervous, Vanessa walking out, claiming she needed stability. All while my family watched from a distance, neither helping nor openly hindering. Or so I'd thought. They actively sabotaged me, I said, the word strange in my mouth. My own family. Lucas pulled up another document. It gets worse. Look at the patent applications Helios filed 18 months ago. The approach is different, but the underlying principle is based on my early research. I finished scanning the technical language. They couldn't replicate my breakthrough, but they got close enough to create confusion in the market. To make potential investors nervous about IP conflicts. I remembered the brutal second round of funding, the sudden cold feet, the questions about patent defensibility. How many sleepless nights had I spent redesigning components to ensure clear differentiation? My phone buzzed. Vanessa again. Had so much fun catching up with Lucas. Dinner tomorrow? I'm at the Mandarin Oriental through Sunday. I showed Lucas the message. His expression hardened. You never had that catching up with her, did you? I asked. No. But I did mention to her that we'd made a breakthrough with the thermal management system. His eyes widened. Marcus, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I held up a hand. None of us did. Another text arrived, this one from Olivia. Need to discuss the Westinghouse proposal. Urgent. Dinner tonight? The timing couldn't be coincidental. The Westinghouse deal, a potential partnership worth billions, had just materialized after the Forbes piece. They're circling, Lucas said. Your family, Vanessa, Olivia, they all want something. Information, I concluded. Access to the full patent portfolio. Details about pending deals. I stared at my phone, then at the Edison bulb glowing softly on Lucas's desk. My grandfather had told me stories about Thomas Edison, not just his inventions but his business acumen, his strategic thinking. I think, I said slowly, it's time I gave them what they want. Lucas raised an eyebrow. You're going to hand over your life's work? No. A plan was forming, dangerous perhaps but fitting. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. I texted Vanessa back. Dinner tomorrow sounds perfect. 8 p.m.? Then Olivia. Westinghouse details are sensitive. My place, 7 p.m. Bringing the contract drafts. Lucas watched me, concern evident. You're playing with fire, Marcus? No, I corrected him, pocketing my phone. I'm playing their game. But unlike them, I know exactly what the stakes are. Outside, Boston's autumn light was fading, the Charles River catching the last golden reflections. From Lucas's window, I could see the MIT dome where our journey had begun. Two idealistic engineering students believing that innovation alone would change the world. How naive we'd been. Cameron's office occupied the 32nd floor of a gleaming tower in Boston's financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the harbor, where morning light danced on the water. I was kept waiting for 23 minutes in the reception area, a power play I'd anticipated. Marcus. My brother emerged, cashmere sweater under a tailored blazer, extending his hand as if we were business acquaintances. This is unexpected. Is it? I smiled thinly. I thought after our family reunion, a brotherly catch-up was overdue. Something flickered behind his eyes, caution, perhaps curiosity. Of course. Come in. His corner office was exactly what you'd expect. Minimalist furniture, expensive art, awards displayed with calculated modesty. A framed family photo sat on his desk. Our parents, Cameron, his wife Charlotte, their two perfect children. I was conspicuously absent. Congratulations again on the Forbes piece, Cameron said, gesturing for me to sit. Dad hasn't stopped talking about it. Funny, I replied, considering he spent years telling me to abandon the project. Cameron laughed, the sound hollow. You know, Dad. Old-school finance mentality. If it doesn't yield returns in 18 months, it's not worth doing. I pulled out a folder and placed it on his immaculate desk. Speaking of returns, I've been reviewing some interesting investment patterns. His expression didn't change, but his right hand, resting on the desk, twitched slightly. Oh. Helios Energy. I opened the folder. Your fund made substantial investments 3 years ago, right when my lab tests were showing promise. We have a diverse portfolio, he replied smoothly. Renewable energy has always been a sector of interest. Along with diverting potential investors from my startup? Cameron's smile tightened. I don't know what you're implying. Don't you? I leaned forward. 2 venture capital firms suddenly pulled out of my first funding round after meetings with your associates. Firms that, coincidentally, have long-standing relationships with Hayes Financial. The market is competitive, Marcus. Not everything is a conspiracy against you. Then explain why Helios filed patents based on my early research. I slid across printouts Lucas had prepared. Research I only shared with family. Cameron examined the papers with practiced nonchalance, but the muscle working in his jaw betrayed him. These patents are nothing like your technology, he said finally. No, they're cheap knockoffs. Just similar enough to create market confusion and investor hesitation. I kept my voice even. A brilliant strategy, actually. Didn't need to steal my work, just needed to muddy the waters. Cameron set the papers down, measuring his response. The business world isn't your university lab, Marcus. It's cutthroat. Always has been. Even between brothers? Especially between brothers. Something hardened in his expression. Do you have any idea what it's like growing up as Richard Hayes' son? The expectations? The pressure to perform? I have some idea, I replied dryly. No, you don't. He stood, walking to the window. You got to be the dreamer. The brilliant mind following his passion. I had to be the pragmatist. The one who maintained the Hayes legacy. By sabotaging my work? By protecting family interests. He turned to face me. Your technology was unproven. The market uncertain. I made a calculated decision. To bet against me. To hedge our position. He returned to his desk. For what it's worth, you proved me wrong. Congratulations. The words held no warmth. I studied my brother, 38 years old, already showing the same lines around his eyes that our father had. The crushing weight of expectation had turned him cold, calculating. Dad knew, I said. It wasn't a question. Cameron's silence was confirmation enough. And Vanessa? I pressed. Was hiring her part of your hedging strategy too? A flicker of genuine surprise crossed his face. That was Dad's idea. She came to him after leaving you. Said she had insights into your research. The betrayal shouldn't have felt fresh, but it did, a knife twisting anew. And now she's back because the technology is viable. Proven. Cameron shrugged as if the answer were obvious. The family needs a foothold. The family, I repeated. Not Hayes Financial. Not your fund. Cameron hesitated just for a beat too long. They're one and the same. But they weren't. The hesitation told me everything. Something bigger was happening. Something beyond Cameron's typical corporate maneuvering. I gathered my documents, tucking them back into the folder. It was enlightening talking with you, brother. Marcus. His voice stopped me at the door. Whatever you think you know, you only have pieces of the puzzle. Be careful which pieces you try to force together. I turned, meeting his gaze. Is that advice or a warning? Both. For a moment, something like genuine concern crossed his face. Some games are too dangerous to play. Even for a Hayes. I left without responding, his words following me into the elevator. As the doors closed, I checked my watch. 5 hours until dinner with Olivia. Plenty of time to prepare the next move in this dangerous game. You look terrible, Lucas remarked as I entered our laboratory's secure server room. The windowless space hummed with cooling fans, bathing us in the blue glow of monitoring screens. Brotherly bonding will do that, I replied, setting down the coffee I'd brought him. Cameron all but admitted to deliberately undermining my funding rounds. Lucas whistled low. And you didn't punch him? I'm impressed. Violence would be satisfying but unproductive. I pulled up a chair beside him. Did you find anything? Lucas had been running comprehensive security audits since yesterday. Now, he gestured to his screen with the flourish of a magician revealing his trick. Someone's been trying to access our servers for months, he said. Sophisticated attempts too. Not your garden variety hacking. I leaned closer, scanning the logs. How did we miss this? They were careful, staggered attempts, different IP addresses, legitimate-looking credentials. Lucas pulled up another window. But there's a pattern. Most attempts occur during business hours. East Coast time. From where? That's the interesting part. His fingers flew across the keyboard. I traced several back to a virtual private network registered to. He paused dramatically. Hayes Capital Management. I finished, spotting the name. Bingo. Lucas nodded. Your father's company. My stomach twisted. Even expecting this, the confirmation felt like a physical blow. Did they get in? I asked. No evidence of successful penetration. Lucas sounded proud. Our security held. But they were persistent, especially targeting files related to the thermal regulation patents. The core of the technology, I murmured. Without those innovations, the entire system would overheat within minutes. What about Olivia's access logs? Nothing suspicious from her credentials directly. Lucas frowned. But there's something else. He pulled up emails from our secured servers, correspondence between Olivia and external contacts. Most were standard business communications with suppliers and potential partners. Then I saw it. Artemis Consulting? I pointed to the recurring email address. I've never heard of them. Me neither, so I dug deeper. Lucas pulled up registration documents. Shell company. Established 18 months ago. And guess who sits on the board? He clicked through to a document showing a familiar name, Charlotte Hayes. My brother's wife. Cameron kept it in the family, I said, the pieces clicking together. Olivia's been feeding information to my sister-in-law's company. Which reports to your brother, Lucas added. Who reports to my father. I rubbed my temples, fighting a growing headache. But they never accessed the thermal regulation patents? Not successfully. But, Lucas hesitated. What? Someone else has been trying. He pulled up another set of logs. Different pattern, different approach. More brute force, less finesse. A competitor? Maybe. Lucas looked troubled. These attempts started 3 days after the Forbes piece. My phone buzzed, a text from Olivia confirming our dinner. Another from Vanessa asking about tomorrow. They're closing in, I said quietly. Now that the technology is validated, everyone wants a piece. Mr. Hayes? A woman's voice from the doorway startled us both. She was tall, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun, wearing a pantsuit that screamed federal agent. I'm Detective Sarah Winters, Boston Police Department. She flashed a badge. I need to speak with you about a potential corporate espionage case involving your company. Lucas and I exchanged glances. Which case? I asked carefully. Apparently we have several to choose from. Her eyes narrowed slightly. May we speak privately? I nodded to Lucas, who reluctantly left us alone in the server room. I'm investigating attempts to access secured intellectual property belonging to Hayes Energy Solutions, she explained once the door closed. We received an anonymous tip. Anonymous? I repeated. Yes. With very specific information about the hacking attempts. She studied my face. You don't seem surprised. We just discovered the attempts ourselves, I admitted. We were about to report them. I see. Something in her tone suggested she didn't entirely believe me. Mr. Hayes, corporate espionage carries serious penalties. But so does withholding evidence in an active investigation. I'm not withholding anything, I countered. But this situation is complicated. Family businesses often are. The comment was casual, but her eyes watched for my reaction. You've done your homework, I noted. It's my job. She handed me her card. I'll need access to your security logs and a list of everyone with security clearance to your patents. I took the card, noticing the FBI logo beneath her details. Not just Boston Police then. Including Olivia Blackwood? I asked. A flicker of interest crossed her face. Your business partner? Is there a reason to suspect her? Possibly. I hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Detective Winters, how much do you know about Hayes Capital Management? Your father's company? She tilted her head. Should I know something specific? I considered my options carefully. Bringing in law enforcement would escalate matters beyond my control. Yet the appearance of Detective Winters, right as I discovered the extent of the betrayal, seemed too convenient to be coincidence. I'll provide everything you need, I said finally. But I'd appreciate discretion. Until we understand exactly what we're dealing with. Understood. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Mr. Hayes. Be careful who you trust. Corporate espionage cases rarely involve just one bad actor. As she left, I wondered if her warning was professional courtesy, or something more personal. Olivia's downtown apartment offered a postcard view of Boston Harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the water, where lights from boats and buildings shimmered against the evening darkness. Everything in the space spoke of careful curation. Minimalist furniture, strategic art pieces, not a thing out of place. Just like Olivia herself. I've decanted the Cabernet, she called from the kitchen. The one from that vineyard in Napa you liked. I stood at the windows, watching her reflection as she approached with 2 glasses. Olivia Blackwood, brilliant MIT graduate, 5 years my junior, who joined my struggling company when everyone else was fleeing. My business partner, who'd worked 18-hour days beside me as we perfected the thermal regulation system. Who was apparently feeding information to my family through a shell company. Quite a view, I remarked, accepting the wine. Perks of the IPO windfall. She smiled, standing close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle. Though your place must have the better view now. Forbes cover boy. I returned her smile, clinking glasses. To success. To partnership, she countered, holding my gaze a beat too long. We moved to her dining table, where she'd arranged the Westinghouse contract documents in precise stacks. Always organized, always prepared, it was why I trusted her to handle the business side while I focused on the technology. They're offering $20 billion, she began, sliding the executive summary toward me. Full acquisition with autonomy provisions and a 5-year leadership contract for both of us. Generous, I noted, scanning the terms. Almost too generous. It's a seller's market. Olivia leaned forward. After the Forbes piece, every energy conglomerate wants what we have. Westinghouse is just moving fastest. And what exactly do they think they're buying? I asked carefully. The complete patent portfolio, of course. Manufacturing rights. Our team. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Is there something we're not disclosing? I sipped my wine. Tell me about Artemis Consulting. The change was subtle, a momentary freeze quickly masked by a practiced confusion. Who? Charlotte Hayes' shell company. The one you've been emailing regularly for the past year. Olivia set down her glass with deliberate precision. You've been monitoring my communications. Lucas has been conducting a security audit, I corrected. After discovering persistent hacking attempts against our servers. And naturally you suspect me. Her voice was controlled, but color had risen to her cheeks. After everything we've built together. I'd prefer to be wrong. She stood abruptly, walking back to the windows. For a long moment she stared out at the harbor, her silhouette sharp against the darkness. It's not what you think, she said finally. Enlighten me. Charlotte approached me 13 months ago. Olivia's reflection in the glass appeared ghostly, disconnected. Said your family wanted to invest in the company. Significantly. But they needed reassurance. Reassurance, I repeated. About the technology. Its viability. She turned to face me. You were burning through cash. Our last funding round barely closed. I thought I was saving the company. By spying for my family. By providing progress reports. She crossed her arms defensively. Basic updates, Marcus. Nothing proprietary. Nothing they couldn't have learned from our quarterly investor statements. Then why the shell company? Why not approach me directly? Olivia hesitated. They said you were difficult about family involvement, that you had rejected their help before. I laughed bitterly. Help? They actively undermined my early funding rounds. My brother invested in my competitors. I didn't know that. Her protest seemed genuine, but I'd thought her incapable of betrayal once too. What changed after the Forbes piece? I pressed. Suddenly Charlotte needed more than progress reports? Olivia's expression shifted, the calculation behind her eyes visible now that I knew to look for it. They asked about the thermal regulation patents, she admitted. Said they needed technical details for the investment team. And you provided them? No. She met my gaze directly. That's where I drew the line. I told Charlotte I wouldn't share proprietary information without your knowledge. How principled, I remarked dryly. It's the truth. Anger flashed in her eyes. Check the server logs. I never accessed those files for external sharing. I already knew this from Lucas's audit, but hearing her confirm it was oddly reassuring. So what was your endgame, Olivia? Betray me just enough to get family money, but not enough to compromise the technology? I wasn't betraying you. I was protecting our company. She moved closer, her voice softening. Marcus, we were weeks from bankruptcy. I did what I thought was necessary. And the Westinghouse deal? Is that what you think is necessary now? She hesitated. It's a good offer. It's also perfectly timed, I noted. Right when my family is pushing for access to the complete patents. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You think Westinghouse is a front? I think it's convenient. I stood, gathering the contract documents. And I think we're done here. Marcus, wait. She caught my arm. Whatever you believe about me, be careful. Your family, there's more happening than you know. Seems to be the recurring theme in my life lately. I'm serious. Her grip tightened. After the Forbes piece, Charlotte started asking different questions. Not just about technology but about you. Personal questions. Security protocols. Access to your home. A chill ran through me. Why? I don't know. But it scared me. For the first time tonight, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. That's why I didn't give them what they wanted. I studied her face, searching for deception and finding only complicated truth. Good night, Olivia. Outside I called Lucas. I need you to check something else. Not just server access but physical security logs. See if anyone's tried to breach the building recently. Already on it, he replied grimly. After Detective Winters left, I expanded the audit. You're not going to like what I found. The Hayes Capital Management building stood like a monument to financial power, 56 floors of steel and glass in the heart of Boston's financial district. As the elevator climbed toward the executive floor, I thought about the last time I'd been here. 22 years old, fresh from MIT, pitching my first invention to my father and his board. They declined to invest. Too speculative, too uncertain. Too unlike the steady, predictable financial products that had built the Hayes fortune. Now I returned, not as a supplicant but as an accuser. My father's executive assistant recognized me immediately. Mr. Hayes, your father is in a meeting, but... I'm sure he'll see me, I interrupted, already moving toward his office door. She rose halfway, uncertain. Sir, I should. I pushed through the heavy oak door without knocking. Richard Hayes sat behind his massive desk, phone to his ear. Two men in expensive suits occupied the chairs opposite him. All three looked up in surprise at my entrance. I'll call you back, my father said into the phone, his expression shifting from shock to controlled neutrality. Marcus, this is unexpected. Family emergency, I replied. Gentlemen, you'll have to excuse us. The two men glanced at my father, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They gathered their papers and departed, eyeing me curiously as they passed. When the door closed, my father gestured to the now vacant chairs. To what do I owe this dramatic entrance? I remained standing. 3 separate hacking attempts against my company's secure servers. Physical security breaches at my laboratory. All traced back to Hayes Capital Management. Serious accusations. He leaned back, studying me. Do you have evidence? I pulled a thumb drive from my pocket, tossing it onto his desk. Everything's there. Including the shell company registered to Charlotte, which Olivia has been reporting to. A flicker of something. Annoyance? Respect? Crossed his face. You've been busy. The FBI has copies, I added. Detective Sarah Winters is investigating. That got his attention. His fingers stopped their rhythmic tapping on the desk edge. I see. He stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the Boston skyline, the same commanding view Cameron had 30 floors below. Do you know why I named you Marcus? The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. Mom said it was a family name. Marcus Aurelius, he corrected. The philosopher-emperor. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He turned to face me. I always hoped you'd understand that principle. Is this philosophy lesson supposed to justify corporate espionage? It's meant to help you see the bigger picture. He moved to a side table, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into crystal tumblers. He offered me one which I declined. Your technology, he continued, sipping his drink, is not merely an advancement in energy storage. It's a geopolitical lever. A national security asset. I laughed incredulously. Now it's about patriotism? You tried to steal my work. No. His voice hardened. I tried to secure it. There are interested parties who would do far worse than corporate espionage to acquire what you've created. So hacking my servers was for my own protection? Information gathering, he corrected. Assessment of vulnerabilities. Your security was surprisingly robust. Thanks to Lucas. I stepped closer, studying the man who had shaped my childhood with his absence and disappointment. Why not just talk to me? Why the elaborate schemes? Vanessa, Olivia, Cameron? Would you have listened? He raised an eyebrow. You've spent your adult life defining yourself in opposition to me, to this family. When have you ever willingly accepted Hayes' involvement in your affairs? The question struck uncomfortably close to truth. I had rejected family money, family connections, determined to succeed on my own merits. That doesn't justify what you did. Perhaps not. He set down his glass. But consider this, Westinghouse is not what it appears to be. Their acquisition offer comes with strings attached by interests beyond commercial profit. What are you saying? I'm saying there are players in this game you haven't identified yet. His eyes held mine. Foreign entities who see your technology as transformative, not just for energy markets but for military applications. My mind raced, recalling Lucas's findings about the second set of hacking attempts. Different pattern, different approach. More brute force. The other hackers, I said slowly. After the Forbes piece. Yes. He nodded. Not us. And I'm supposed to believe you're the benevolent protector in all this? After you had Vanessa spy on me? After Cameron deliberately undermined my funding? Vanessa approached us, not the other way around. He returned to his desk. As for Cameron's actions with your early investors, that was his initiative. Misguided perhaps, but not my directive. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to verify it as you verified everything else. He pressed a button on his phone. Sandra, bring in the Thorn file. His assistant appeared moments later with a thick folder, which my father handed to me. Review this. Then we'll talk about how to handle Westinghouse and the other interested parties. I took the folder, my anger now complicated by uncertainty. Why should I trust anything you say? Because despite everything, Marcus, we're family. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. And because I have always been proud of you, even when I couldn't understand your choices. I stared at him, searching for manipulation behind the unexpected sentiment. All I found was a complex truth. A father who had failed me in fundamental ways, yet perhaps had not betrayed me as completely as I'd believed. I'll look at the file, I said finally. But this doesn't erase what you did. No, he agreed. Some things once broken can never be fully repaired. But they can be rebuilt into something different. Perhaps something stronger. I left his office with more questions than answers, the Thorn file heavy in my hands. The Mandarin Oriental's restaurant buzzed with quiet luxury, crystal glasses catching light, hushed conversations over exquisite food. Vanessa sat across from me, radiant in a black dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her smile hadn't changed, the same practiced curve that had once made my heart race. Now I recognized it for what it was, a weapon. You look good, Marcus. She reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. Success suits you. I allowed the contact briefly before withdrawing my hand to reach for my water. You mentioned at the reunion that you're consulting now? Energy sector primarily. She nodded, sipping her wine. Ironic, isn't it? I finally understand your work just when you've perfected it. Very convenient timing, I agreed, watching her eyes. They gave away nothing. 3 years ago, I would have done anything to have her sitting across from me again. I remembered that desperate night, rain pounding against the windows of our apartment as she packed her things. "I can't do this anymore, Marcus," she'd said, refusing to meet my eyes. The constant uncertainty. The financial strain. "The prototype is working," I'd argued. "We're close to a breakthrough. You've been close for 2 years." Her voice had been flat, decided. "I need stability. A real life, not endless promises." She'd left me for a hedge fund manager named David. That relationship had lasted 8 months. "I've thought about you," Vanessa said now, interrupting my memories. "Often." "Really? Even while you were consulting for my father?" Her expression flickered, surprise quickly masked by composure. "Business is business, Marcus." "And what business exactly brought you to Richard Hayes after you left me?" She set down her glass carefully. "I see Cameron has been talking. Among others." I leaned forward. "Did you offer information about my research willingly, or was that his idea?" "It wasn't like that." Her eyes darted briefly to the neighboring tables. "Your father approached me. Said he was concerned about your well-being, your financial situation." "My well-being?" I repeated skeptically. "You were working 100-hour weeks, barely eating, hardly sleeping." A flash of what seemed like genuine concern crossed her face. "He said he wanted to help, but you'd never accept it directly. So you became his spy instead." "His consultant," she corrected sharply. "And yes, I shared insights about your working methods, your progress. Nothing proprietary. Just enough to help Helios Energy develop competing patents." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I didn't know about that." I studied her face, the face I'd once memorized in morning light, in moonlight, in the blue glow of my laboratory. How had I never seen this calculating edge beneath the beauty? "Why come back now, Vanessa?" "The truth." She hesitated, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. "2 reasons. The first, yes, your success. I won't pretend the Forbes cover didn't get my attention. And the second? Richard contacted me again." She lowered her voice. "He's worried about you. About threats to your safety." I thought of the Thorn file, still unread in my briefcase. "What kind of threats?" "He wouldn't specify. But he asked if I would reconnect with you. See if you would confide in me." I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "And you agreed?" "For old time's sake." "For a consulting fee," she admitted, unrepentant. "But also because I was curious. The Marcus Hayes on that magazine cover isn't the man I left. I wanted to know who you've become." "And what have you learned?" "That you're colder now. More controlled." Her eyes traveled across my face. "The boy who used to talk for hours about changing the world is gone. He grew up. He hardened." She reached for my hand again, and this time I let her take it. "Marcus, whatever you think of me, of us, be careful. Your father believes there are people who would hurt you to get your technology." "People other than my family, you mean?" She flinched slightly but didn't withdraw. "Your father may be many things, but he wouldn't harm you." "No?" "Ask Cameron about the diverted investment rounds. About Helios Energy." Genuine confusion crossed her face. "What are you talking about?" My phone buzzed, a text from Lucas. "Call immediately. Found something in security footage." "I have to take this," I said, standing. "Marcus." Vanessa caught my arm, her expression suddenly vulnerable. "For what it's worth, leaving you was the mistake I regret most. 4 years ago those words would have meant everything. Now, they were just more data points in a pattern of manipulation." "Good night, Vanessa." Outside I called Lucas. "Someone entered your apartment yesterday," he said without preamble. "Used a key." "Who?" "The footage isn't clear, but it matches Charlotte's height and build." "My sister-in-law. In my home." I thought of what Olivia had said about Charlotte's questions. Security protocols, access to my home. "What did she take?" I asked. "That's just it, nothing obvious is missing. But she spent 20 minutes in your home office." "And Marcus?" Lucas hesitated. "The Edison bulb is gone. My grandfather's gift. The symbol of my journey." "I'm coming in," I said, hailing a taxi. "And Lucas, don't tell anyone where I am. Not even Detective Winters." As the city lights blurred past the window, I finally opened the Thorn file. The first page contained a single photograph, a man I'd never seen before, standing beside my father. The caption made my blood run cold. "Alexander Thorn, Director of Special Projects, Department of Defense." "This goes deeper than family betrayal," Lucas said, scanning through the Thorn file spread across my laboratory workbench. "We're talking national security implications." Dawn light filtered through the high windows of our secure research facility. We'd been here all night, reviewing documents, security footage, connecting threads that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The DoD has been tracking my research for years, I said, rubbing my tired eyes. According to these reports, they see applications beyond civilian energy storage. Portable power for advanced weapons systems, Lucas nodded grimly. Drone swarms, battlefield robotics, mobile laser platforms, all currently limited by battery capacity. I studied the documents detailing meetings between my father and Alexander Thorne dating back 5 years. My father has been facilitating their interest from the beginning, while simultaneously protecting your patents from foreign intelligence services, Lucas pointed out. These security reports show at least 3 separate espionage attempts by international actors. The contradiction made my head hurt. Richard Hayes, corporate manipulator and patriotic protector? The man who dismissed my work for years while secretly brokering its potential military applications? None of this justifies what they did, I said finally. The hacking attempts, using Vanessa and Olivia, Cameron's sabotage of my funding. No, Lucas agreed. But it complicates things. I moved to the whiteboard where we'd mapped connections between all the players. My family, Vanessa, Olivia, Detective Winters, Alexander Thorne, Westinghouse Energy. Charlotte taking the Edison bulb makes no sense, I mused. It has sentimental value, but no technological significance. Unless. Lucas paused, looking troubled. What? Unless it's not about the bulb itself, but what might be hidden inside it. He hesitated. Remember those miniature prototypes we developed for the thermal regulation system? The ones small enough to fit inside a light bulb housing? Cold realization washed over me. They think I hid proprietary technology inside my grandfather's gift? It would be a perfect hiding place. Sentimental, always with you, but technically unremarkable. I shook my head, anger rising. This has gone far enough. It's time to set some traps of our own. For the next 2 hours, we developed a counter-strategy. By 9 a.m. I had sent 3 carefully crafted emails. To Olivia, reviewed Westinghouse proposal. Found concerning gaps in the technology transfer provisions. Need to discuss privately. Working from home today with revised security protocols in place. Will call you. To Vanessa, still processing our conversation. There's something important I need to show you. Can you meet at my apartment tonight? 8 p.m. Come alone. To Cameron, we should talk. Father showed me the Thorne file. I've developed additional thermal regulation breakthroughs not yet patented. Need family advice on handling DoD interest. My office, 3 p.m. today. Different bait for different prey. You really think they'll take it? Lucas asked as I finished. People believe what aligns with their expectations, I replied. Olivia expects business concerns. Vanessa expects emotional vulnerability. Cameron expects that I'm finally accepting the family's involvement. And what about Detective Winters? Where does she fit? I studied the board. That's what I intend to find out. Keep monitoring all communications and security systems. I want to know who contacts whom after receiving these messages. Lucas nodded but looked concerned. Marcus, you're playing a dangerous game. If there really are foreign intelligence services involved, then it's all the more important to understand exactly who wants what, I finished. And who I can trust, if anyone. My phone buzzed with incoming responses, all 3 targets taking the bait. As I reviewed their messages, Detective Winters called. Mr. Hayes, her voice was professionally neutral. I need to speak with you regarding some new developments in our investigation. Of course, Detective. My lab in 1 hour. After hanging up, I checked the security feeds Lucas had established. Olivia was already on the phone, not with Charlotte as expected, but with a number matching one in the Thorne file. Cameron was texting rapidly, his messages routing through an encryption service we couldn't crack. Vanessa had called my father immediately after receiving my text. Each reaction told its own story. They're moving, Lucas noted, watching the activity unfold across his monitors. Good. I gathered the most sensitive documents from the Thorne file, securing them in our laboratory safe. Now we see who's working with whom, and what they really want. And the Edison bulb? Lucas asked. Do you think Charlotte found anything? There was nothing to find, I said. But now we know they're willing to violate my personal space, not just my professional security. The laboratory door opened, revealing Detective Winters. She wore the same severe suit as before, but something about her demeanor had changed, a subtle tension around her eyes. Mr. Hayes, she began formally, then glanced at Lucas. I need to speak with you privately. Lucas looked to me for confirmation. I nodded, and he reluctantly left, closing the door behind him. You've been busy, Winters said once we were alone. 3 very interesting emails sent this morning. My blood went cold. How did she know about those? You're monitoring my communications, I said. Not a question. Not me. She pulled out her badge, different from the one she'd shown previously. Sarah Winters, FBI Counterintelligence Division. Your father requested protective surveillance 3 days ago. She placed a small device on my workbench. This conversation is now secure from electronic eavesdropping. We need to talk about the honeypot you've just created, and the very dangerous individuals who are about to walk into it. The technology attracts 3 distinct threat vectors, Agent Winters explained, spreading surveillance photos across my workbench. Domestic corporate espionage, foreign state actors, and military-industrial interests. I studied the images. Olivia meeting with a man identified as Pavel Korlov, Russian energy attaché. Cameron shaking hands with the Westinghouse CEO. Charlotte entering my apartment building. My father knew all this, I said, the realization still bitter. He's been tracking these threats for years without telling me. Richard Hayes approached us 6 months ago with evidence of coordinated attempts to acquire your technology. Winters' expression remained professional, but her tone softened slightly. His methods were unorthodox, but his concern appears genuine. Concern? I laughed harshly. He undermined my funding, recruited my ex-fiancée as an informant, and hacked my servers. According to our investigation, the funding issues were Cameron's initiative, not your father's. She tapped a document. Richard actually provided anonymous bridge financing through 3 separate shells when your second round nearly collapsed. The revelation stunned me. Those mysterious investors who had appeared at the 11th hour, saving the company when all seemed lost, had been my father all along? As for the server intrusions, she continued, they were security tests conducted with DoD oversight. Your systems passed, by the way. Impressively. Thanks to Lucas, I said automatically, my mind still processing these revelations. My phone buzzed, Cameron confirming our 3 o'clock meeting. Then Olivia asking about the Westinghouse contract concerns. The traps were working. Your honeypots have created an opportunity, Winters said, but also accelerated the timeline. All 3 targets are making moves. She brought up a laptop showing real-time surveillance. Olivia contacted Korlov immediately after your email. They're meeting in 30 minutes at the harbor. Another screen showed Vanessa entering my father's building. A third displayed Cameron in his office, speaking intently with Charlotte. They've all taken the bait, I noted. Now what? Now we watch the house of cards collapse. Winters checked her watch. Your 3 targets each represent different interests. By feeding them conflicting information, you've created distrust among the various factions. As if on cue, Lucas burst into the laboratory. Marcus, you need to see this. Westinghouse just issued a press release announcing a strategic technological partnership with Hayes Energy Solutions. What? I stared at him in disbelief. I haven't agreed to any partnership. Cameron signed it, Lucas said grimly. As a strategic advisor to Hayes Energy. Fury washed over me. He has no authority. But he has legitimate-looking documentation, Winters interrupted, pulling up a file on her laptop. Corporate authorization papers with what appears to be your signature. Dated last week. Forged, I spat. Professionally, she agreed. And timed to coincide with the Forbes publicity. My phone exploded with notifications. Colleagues, investors, journalists all asking about the Westinghouse deal. Cameron had played his hand. Simultaneously, Winters received an alert. Olivia just provided Korlov with technical specifications. Our team intercepted the transfer. It's not your actual technology. Lucas looked confused. What did she give him? The modified schematics I planted last month, I explained, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Functional enough to seem legitimate, but with fatal flaws in the thermal regulation system. Any prototype built with those specs would catastrophically fail within minutes. Setting your competitors back years, Lucas realized. And confirming Olivia's true allegiances, I added. Another alert pinged on Winters' laptop. Vanessa just left your father's office. She's headed to your apartment. Right on schedule, I nodded. Lucas, is everything prepared there? Hidden cameras in place. The false prototype is in your safe, the one with the intentionally obvious fingerprint scanner. The pieces were moving exactly as I'd anticipated. Olivia betraying specifications to Russian interests. Cameron forging documents for Westinghouse. Vanessa, no doubt, planning to search my apartment for the non-existent breakthrough I'd mentioned. "We need to move," Winters said, gathering her materials. "Your father is holding an emergency board meeting at Hayes Capital in response to the Westinghouse announcement. All the players will be responding simultaneously." As we prepared to leave, I paused at my workbench, looking at the sprawling web of betrayal we'd mapped out. Family, colleagues, lovers, all circling what they thought was the prize. "You know," I said quietly to Winters, "for years I thought the technology was what mattered. That my breakthrough would change everything." "And now?" she asked. "Now I realize it's just a lens that revealed who people truly are." I gathered the last of the Thorne documents, including my father. "Richard Hayes is complicated," Winters acknowledged. "But our investigation suggests his primary concern has been your safety, not the technology itself." I thought of the Edison bulb now missing from my desk. A symbol of innovation, yes, but also the only gift my grandfather had given me that my father hadn't dismissed. "We'll see," I said, unconvinced. "The real test is what happens when the house of cards falls." As we left the laboratory, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Edison kept safe. Meet at the garden. Midnight. RH." My father reaching out directly at last. Chaos erupted across Boston as my traps sprung in sequence. From Agent Winters' mobile command center, we watched the drama unfold on multiple screens. Screen 1. Olivia being detained by FBI agents at the harbor, Korloff escorted separately to a waiting vehicle, both looking stunned. Screen 2. The Westinghouse CEO holding an emergency press conference, denying knowledge of forged documents, their stock plummeting in real time. Screen 3. My apartment, where Vanessa methodically searched through my belongings, completely unaware of the cameras recording her every move. "Your plan worked almost too well," Winters noted, watching the monitors. "Korloff's diplomatic status complicates matters, but we have Olivia on attempted technology transfer to a foreign agent." "And Cameron?" I asked. "Securities fraud at minimum." She nodded to a screen showing my brother being escorted from his office by FBI agents. "The forged authorization papers carry serious penalties." I should have felt vindicated. Instead, a strange emptiness settled over me as I watched these people, colleagues, family, my former lover, face the consequences of their betrayals. "What about my father?" I asked. Winters hesitated. "Richard Hayes remains complicated. He's cooperating with our investigation while simultaneously managing the Hayes Capital fallout from Cameron's arrest." "And the DoD connection? Alexander Thorne?" "That's above my clearance," she admitted. "But I can tell you they're extremely interested in ensuring your technology remains secure and under American control." Night had fallen over Boston by the time the initial chaos subsided. The command center buzzed with agents processing evidence, making calls, building cases against those caught in our net. I checked my watch. 11:30 p.m. The garden. Midnight. "I need to leave," I told Winters. Her eyes narrowed. "The operation is ongoing. We still haven't secured." "I know." I cut her off. "But there's something I need to do." She studied my face. "The text from your father." I didn't deny it. "Marcus," she said quietly, "despite everything we've learned, we still don't know if Richard Hayes is an ally or the mastermind behind all of this. That's what I intend to find out." After a moment's consideration, she handed me a small device. "Panic button. Press it if you need extraction." "And Marcus," her expression softened momentarily, "be careful. Family complications are the hardest to navigate objectively." The Hayes estate was dark as my car approached, security gates opening automatically as if I were expected. I drove past the main house toward the garden at the property's edge, my grandfather's creation now maintained by my father. The place where, as a child, I'd first learned about Edison, Tesla, and the power of human ingenuity. In the moonlight, the garden took on an ethereal quality. Stone paths wound between carefully maintained topiaries and seasonal plantings. At its center stood a small gazebo, illuminated by a single light. My father waited there, the Edison bulb cradled in his hands. "You came," he said simply as I approached. "You took something that belongs to me. Charlotte's initiative, not mine." He held out the bulb. I retrieved it once I discovered what she'd done. I took it, checking for damage. The filament glowed softly as I turned it over. "Why here? Why midnight?" "Privacy." He gestured to the garden around us. And sentiment, perhaps. Your grandfather taught you about Edison here. Sparked your fascination with energy. While you pushed me toward finance. A father's narrow-mindedness. He sat on the gazebo bench, suddenly looking older than his 64 years. I couldn't see beyond the world I knew. I remained standing, unwilling to relax my guard. Cameron has been arrested. Olivia detained. Vanessa caught searching my apartment. Your house of cards has collapsed. Not my construction, he said wearily. Though I bear responsibility for creating the conditions that made it possible. Explain. He sighed deeply. 5 years ago, I was approached by Alexander Thorne about your research. The DoD had identified your work as potentially significant for national security. They asked me to monitor your progress, ensure it remained secure from foreign interests. So you became a patriot for convenience? I became concerned, he countered. About the implications of your work, yes, but also for your safety. The more promising your research became, the more attention it attracted, not all of it benign. And Cameron? Vanessa? Were they your agents too? Cameron acted independently, seeing an opportunity to prove himself by controlling what he perceived as a valuable family asset, your technology. His expression hardened. I didn't authorize his actions with your investors or Westinghouse. That was his own ambition. And Vanessa? She approached me after leaving you. Offered information in exchange for consulting fees. He met my gaze directly. I used her, yes, to understand your progress when you wouldn't share it with me directly. Because you never supported my work, I said bitterly. Not until others valued it. A failure I acknowledge. He stood slowly. But Marcus, there's something you don't yet understand. Something even Agent Winters doesn't know. He reached into his pocket, removing not a weapon as I'd half expected, but a small device, identical to the panic button Winters had given me. The final betrayal isn't mine, he said softly. It's Thorne's. Thorne doesn't work for the Department of Defense, my father explained, his voice barely above a whisper. Not exclusively. He heads a private military technology consortium masquerading as a government division. Moonlight filtered through the gazebo's lattice, casting web-like shadows across his face. I studied him, searching for deception and finding only tightly controlled fear. The Thorne Group maintains legitimate government contracts, he continued, while secretly auctioning technologies to the highest bidders, including foreign interests. You have proof? I kept my voice neutral, though my pulse quickened. He nodded toward the panic button in my hand. That's not connected to Winter's team. It's monitored by Thorne's people. They've been positioning agents around you for months. Including Winters? The possibility sent ice through my veins. No. She's legitimate FBI but compartmentalized, only aware of what Thorne wants her to know. He stepped closer. They let you set your traps because it served their purpose, eliminating competing interests in your technology. The elaborate dance suddenly made horrifying sense. The timing of the Forbes article, Detective Winters' appearance, the foreign hackers who emerged after the cover story. The patent goes public in 3 days, I realized aloud. They've been clearing the field before making their move. Yes. My father's expression was grim. Once your honeypot operation concludes, Thorne plans to approach you directly, offering protection from imagined threats while securing exclusive access to your innovation. I held up the Edison bulb, its filament casting a warm glow between us. And this? Why did Charlotte take it? Insurance, he admitted. In case you discovered the truth before I could warn you. Something to bring you to the table. The garden around us suddenly seemed too exposed. I scanned the darkness beyond the gazebo, newly paranoid. If what you're saying is true, we're both in danger right now. Hence the location. My father gestured subtly to the surrounding garden. The estate's security system was upgraded last month. Military-grade countermeasures. We're in the only surveillance blind spot on the property. I studied the man before me, Richard Hayes, financial titan, emotionally distant father, now potential ally against a threat I hadn't fully comprehended. After a lifetime of measuring myself against him, of resenting his dismissal of my work, I found myself needing to trust him completely. What's our move? I asked finally. Relief flickered across his face at my implicit acceptance of his story. We have evidence, financial trails, recorded conversations, documented technology transfers. Enough to expose Thorne's operation. But not through official channels, I guessed. Too many compromised individuals. We need a direct approach. He checked his watch. Lucas has been gathering the evidence package while you were occupied with the honeypot operation. Lucas. I stared at him. You've been working with Lucas? For 3 months. My father almost smiled. He was reluctant initially, quite protective of you. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, yet it did. My oldest friend, maintaining his loyalty while navigating these treacherous waters. The Forbes cover was never about validation, I said slowly, understanding blossoming. It was about making me visible enough that Thorn couldn't simply make me disappear. A calculated risk, my father acknowledged. Public profile as protection. The magazine reached the right people, oversight committees, intelligence officials beyond Thorn's influence. He removed an envelope from his jacket, handing it to me. Tomorrow morning, these documents will simultaneously reach the FBI director, the Senate Intelligence Committee, and 3 journalists with appropriate security clearances. I opened it, scanning the contents, comprehensive evidence of Thorn's shadow operation, including my father's own complicity in the early stages. This will destroy Hayes Capital, I noted. Your reputation. Some things matter more. His voice was quiet but firm. I lost sight of that once. I won't make that mistake again. The weight of decades of misunderstanding hung between us. His dismissal of my dreams, my rejection of his world. Neither of us fully right, neither entirely wrong. What about Cameron? I asked. Olivia? Vanessa? Cameron faces charges as he should. The others? He sighed. Their futures depend on their cooperation with the investigation. Dawn light was beginning to lighten the eastern sky, the night's protection fading. As if on cue, my phone buzzed, a message from Lucas, package delivered. Extraction team standing by. It's time, my father said. I looked down at the Edison bulb in my hand, the symbol that had followed me from childhood dreams to adult realities, from rejection to success, from betrayal to this unexpected reconciliation. I'm keeping this, I said, carefully tucking it inside my jacket. I'd expect nothing less. A genuine smile touched his lips. Your grandfather would be proud. Of both of us, perhaps. As we walked from the garden toward separate futures neither of us could fully predict, I realized that the true power of my invention wasn't in its technology, but in how it had illuminated the darkness surrounding me, revealing betrayals and loyalties, weaknesses and strengths. Like the magazine that had started this journey, I had finally seen the full story cover to cover.